Today's guest is Christopher Rivers, a former Army officer, combat veteran, diplomat, strategist, and author, whose life has taken him from the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan to the halls of West Point, Georgetown University. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
All right, Chris, I would like you to introduce yourself also to my listeners.
Yeah, happy to. So I was one of those people born and raised in a truly working class family in a state called Connecticut in the United States. And I just knew at a very young age that I wanted to help people. And not knowing what it was like to go to college, not knowing what it was like to do anything beyond normal public education, I didn't know what that path included. And because I lived not too far from New York City when the attacks on 9/11 happened, I decided I wanted to go serve in the military. And that, on one hand, led me down a path that led to a whole bunch of adventures, putting my life on the line, good, bad, ugly, all of it all together. But it also opened up a lot of doors. And walking through those doors, I realized how our system of government actually works and how different governments actually work. And I got to see that both as an Army officer in leading combat missions in places like Afghanistan. Once I went to grad school at Georgetown, I got to see that as a diplomat for the United States, traveling all around the world and seeing how other countries do that. And then afterwards, I went into consulting to try to solve problems for folks. And when I moved back home to my home state of Connecticut, I decided I wanted to get involved with local and state politics. And so I've run a couple of times for state office. I'm on a local office right now. And I wanted to make sure that we could use politics to actually solve problems and not just keep complaining about them. And helping people understand how these systems actually work is what I'm all about now. And that's why I wrote my book that I published earlier this year, You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead, is to teach people how these systems actually work and what they can do to change them.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. So your journey has taken you from combat zones to diplomacy, business, and politics. What experiences shape the way you see leadership and opportunity in America today?
I think let's flip that a little bit, because I think the opportunity is in the fact that I think the United States has a real vacuum of leadership. That might sound crazy to a lot of folks, but one of the things I've learned, whether it's on the battlefield, in boardrooms or whatnot, is it is truly rare to find people willing to stand up and say, here's my idea to fix actual problems. Help me do it. And there's this really famous YouTube video called Leadership Lessons from a guy who can dance or something like that. And it's this picnic that's happening somewhere in the United States. And a guy gets up and starts dancing when no one else is. And the premise of the video is, hey, is that guy the leader? Or what's the most important leadership part here? And it's not the guy who starts the movement. It's the guy who comes in second. The guy who says, I'm willing to follow. And I'm willing to follow this lead. And pretty soon, everyone wants to start dancing because no one wants to be left out. And when you look around politics in the United States today, there's some people dancing, but we need more people to understand that part of leadership is that first follower. And being a really good, impactful first follower can do more to shape an entire movement than being the person on the ballot or being the person on all the commercials. And there's just a huge gap of people wanting to step up into those roles right now. So the opportunity is there. And what we really, I think, need to do is teach people how to step up into those roles to be leaders in ways that may not appear like it on the surface.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. So you have said many people are doing everything right and still falling behind. What do you mean by that? And why is it happening?
Yes, what I mean by that is, at least in American culture, you're really taught, put your head down, go work hard, go work a full-time job, invest in yourself, go get a degree. And when you look at the statistics, people in the United States are working harder in terms of the amount of hours they're working, and they're working harder in terms of the amount they're producing per hour than any time in living history. We are working harder in my generation than my parents' generation ever have. My parents' generation were working harder than my grandparents' generation. And yet, what do we get for that? We get more income inequality. We are actually earning less per hour in buying power or purchasing power than what previous generations got. And we kind of know this intuitively. My grandfather, for example, never went to college. I don't even know if he finished high school or not, was a factory worker, able to raise quite a few kids. My grandmother never had to work, and they had a great middle-class life. My dad was an industrial mechanic until he just recently retired. My mom had to work other jobs. They had to work overtime, much smaller family, but we're able to make ends meet. My generation cannot just work a 40-hour a week work job and be able to raise an entire family. It's just not possible today. And that's what I mean when, people are doing all the right things. They're putting their heads down. They're going to work. They're producing a lot per hour, more than ever before in history. And they're getting less for it. And why is it happening? That's all happening because when a whole bunch of economic shocks hit the entire world in the 1970s, some countries decided that they really wanted government programs to actually solve the problems and expect more out of government. That was sort of the Nordic countries in Europe approach. And then you had the American approach at the time under Reagan, which was government is the problem, and we just need to do everything we can to minimize the role of government in our lives and to empower businesses to solve these problems. And 40 or 50 years later, what you have is wages being suppressed, working hours being increased, and corporate profits having more than doubled in their rate from the 1980s to now. So we're producing a lot more wealth than we ever have, but we created a system designed to benefit particularly large corporations. And we see a system that's very effectively doing that. We also see a system where the political system is really driven by money to reinforce the economic system. And when you really get underneath the hood and understand the history of how we got to here, it becomes really apparent that this was made by design. It wasn't an accident.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. So you knocked on more than 9,000 doors during your campaign. What did those conversations teach you about what Americans are really feeling today?
Yeah, it's what over 9,000 doors and conversations where people put their phones down and talk to each other face to face really taught me is that the struggle is real, that people are working really hard and are really confused by why things just keep getting worse and worse and worse. I've heard plenty that people felt like they were voting for the change candidate over and over and over again, and they kept getting more of the same. I really get the frustration that average, everyday working class Americans are feeling because they're not seeing the change that they want to see, that they keep thinking that they vote for. I also think that the number one issue in the United States is quality of life and affordability. That's it. That's what everything boils down to. Because when things are going well economically, then you have a country that wants to be way more inclusive, that wants to share. But as things start becoming more and more scarce, it becomes, I need to protect my own from everyone else. And so much of what you're seeing going on in the United States today really comes back down to people not feeling like they have enough for themselves and their loved ones.
Okay, Chris, thank you so much. Wow. So knocking on 9,000 doors, that's a lot too. But I'm sure you're able to gather enough data that will teach you about how Americans are really feeling today. So your book is titled You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead. Tell us what that title represents and why did you choose to go for that title?
Yeah, so I wanted a title that was a bit jarring, but also had multiple meanings. And the book itself is split up into basically 3 sections. The first section is my life story. The second section is how do we get to now in the United States where everything is so unequal, the political system, and how do we get to here? And the last third of the book is how do we get out of it? And so the title, You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead, really speaks to all 3 of those parts in different ways. The first part about my life story is I'm trying to use my life story both so that the reader can get to know who I am, good, bad, and otherwise, but also because my path to economic success ultimately went through the battlefield. I want to make the case that I'm actually relatively proud of my military service, but in the richest country in the history of the world, it shouldn't be the main path available if you're born to the wrong zip code. You shouldn't have to go to war in order to get ahead is the first point. The second point is, and I rattled off some stats earlier in this conversation, but people are working so many more hours. They're so stressed out because of the economic system that you can track things like suicide rates. You can track things like deaths of despair in different ways or all of the ills. And what you can really make a case for is that Americans are quite literally working themselves to death. And you shouldn't have to kill yourself in order to get ahead, economically speaking. And then the last third of the book, the way the title connects to it in my mind is when I first started writing the book, I was seeing polling data that said about 1 in 5 Americans thought we needed to use violence to correct the political direction of the country. And that was already shocking. By the time I finished writing the book, it was already 1 in 3. It had jumped up that percentage in about a year. And I wanted to offer up a whole bunch of solutions that would actually fundamentally change the system. Mostly things are already agreed upon by 2/3 or more of the population, and propose them as solutions. So make the case that we don't have to choose violence in order to move our country ahead. That there are solutions, that once you understand everything that's wrong is made this way by decisions that were made, should empower us all just to make better decisions moving forward. And everyone has a role to play in that. And so those are the 3 meanings of the title. And I went with that title to be a bit jarring, to be able to reflect what is going on in the entire book, and to really make people think a little bit deeper about everything they're experiencing day to day.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. So you have seen leadership in the military, government, and business. What qualities are missing from leadership today?
What policies are missing from leadership today? I think part of the problem is at the national level, a lot of our leaders come from a very thin economic slice of America. And by that, I mean, if you want to go run for Congress, you better be able to raise a couple $1 million, and you better be able to take a year and a half off from work. And that's just what it takes. And if you're not in a position to be able to do that, the chances of you actually winning a seat to represent hundreds of thousands of Americans to help make our national policies, it can happen, but it's extremely rare. Something like 97% of races win because they have more money than the other side. That's what we boiled this game down to, unfortunately. And so what do I think is missing is more fair representation. I think what's missing is getting money out of politics. I think what's missing is reducing the barriers to entry to actually allow more people to raise their hand to say, I want to try to do that for a few years. And I know what this lived experience is like to not have healthcare. I know what the lived experience is like to not have enough money for groceries, or to be worried about losing a job I hate because I need the healthcare benefits, or any of those things is largely not in the lived experience of most of our national leaders. And we need more national leaders that have that genuine lived experience, not just as a talking point, not just as a commercial, but genuinely sort of scarred into you by your own lived experience. And I think you would see a lot different debates happening at the national level in the United States if you really opened up and got rid of those barriers to entry for people that we all face.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. So what are the biggest misconceptions people have about the American dream today?
I think the number one biggest misconception is that it's attainable for most people under the age of 40. You know, we have this myth in America that all you have to do is work harder and be more talented than anyone else, and you can make it in America. And some people do make it, but the biggest indicator of whether or not you will be wealthy is how much wealth your parents have. It's not your talent. It's not the amount of hours you worked. It's not any of the other things that our myth is built on. It is quite literally the family you're born into is the number one indicator that oversees everything else. And that is not a system that is a meritocracy. It's not a system that is what the myth of America is sold to be to everyone in the world. And that's the biggest misconception. And when I, grew up in a family that was working class, super hardworking people, genuinely really intelligent people, much more gifted than I was. But I ended up, because of some choices I made and got lucky along the way, I would also say that I got to build a network of people that were able to help lift me up as well. And that network effect of being surrounded by people who had connections, who had resources, is just as or more important than your actual raw talent or work ethic. And that is a really unfortunate thing in a country that pretends to be a meritocracy.
Okay, Chris, thank you so much. So, across combat, diplomacy, and corporate strategy, and politics as well, what common lessons about people and leadership have stayed with you?
I think the number one thing that stuck with me all throughout my journey is that at the end of the day, people are people. Like, we want to have meaningful relationships. We want to be able to spend our time doing meaningful things that provide us purpose and resources to be able to live the sort of life we want to live, to be able to be safe until tomorrow. And that is true of the people I met in Iraq. That's true of the people I met in Afghanistan. It's people I met in Connecticut and Georgia and California and Texas and South America and Africa and Europe. Like, at the end of the day, people are people. And our ability to connect with each other as human beings is incredibly important. And it's incredibly empowering. And if you can figure out how to get out of your own way and learn from others, if you can figure out how to get out of your own way and connect with each other on a more deeper level than the typical small talk that you get at business functions, that is a true superpower. And it's one that I would suggest everyone listening to this lean into, because we're all basically the same at the end of the day. As much as we're all unique and we all have our individual quirks and whatnot, the things that drive most people are pretty similar. Lean into that, get to know each other, learn from each other. That's what I learned. That's what stuck with me.
All right. For someone who feels discouraged or powerless about the state of the country, what's one practical step they can take to regain a sense of purpose and agency?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
For someone who feels discouraged or powerless about the state of the country, what's one practical step they can take to regain a sense of purpose and agency?
Great question. The biggest individual step you can take is first admitting that there is a problem. I think it's hard for Americans to admit that our country has never really lived up to our ideals. The second biggest thing, I think, is education. And education can take a lot of different forms. But if you first identify that there is a problem, then understanding how do the systems work? How do we get here? What's the history behind it? All of that sort of stuff. And it's a big ask. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of nuance. Public policy, you can get a PhD in it and still not know a bunch about it. But if you just kind of take, hey, I am fed up with this. I admit that there's a problem and I want to take some ownership of it, because at the end of the day, if you're American, and one of the fundamental guiding principles of our government is that our government is supposed to represent all of us. I don't think it does that right now. I don't think it has ever truly done that perfectly, but that is the idea. And so we all have to take ownership over it, which means whether you're in elected office or not, you have some responsibility here. And you have some responsibility to get yourself educated. And there's a whole bunch of tools online. There's tools that my team is building. My book is one of them to help with the education side of it. Because at the end of the day, once you start learning about how we got to now, what you will see is very flawed individual human beings made these decisions to make it this way decades ago. And that should empower you to realize that we can make different decisions moving forward. And that aha moment I have seen time and time and time again when people realize that they could be part of the solution. And we don't all have to agree right away on what that solution is. But if you agree that there's a problem, willing to spend a little bit of time every single day to educate yourself on it, then you could be part of the solution. And there's millions of Americans wanting to work with you to help make that solution real. And that can get you from discouraged to empowered overnight. And the second thing I would say is don't let the amount of education you might need deter you. The key to it is this. Don't try to learn it. Excuse me. Don't try to learn it all in one shot. Learn 1% of what you need to know every single day. Because if you just learn 1% every day and that compounds over time, then by the time you get a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, you'll know more than 99.9% of other people. Just stick with it, take it in bite-sized chunks, learn every day and never stop. And then look for people to work with to make that change real. And you will go from discouraged to empowered really quickly.
Hi, Chris. Here is my final question for you. What do you hope readers take away from You Shouldn't Have to Key to Get Ahead? And what role do you hope they will play in creating positive change?
I hope the biggest takeaway that people have when they read my book is that the problems that are discouraging right now are all solvable. Number one. Number two, we all need you to be a part of that solution. And number three, if 1 and 2 are true, then the world we can build together that is more fair, a little bit more just, is amazing to think about. And it's there for the taking. We have the wealth, we have the resources, we have the know-how, we have the capabilities. What we really are lacking is the political will. So be part of it. And my book can help you get educated. There's other books out there that my book references. I have a website up too. There's a bunch of ways to get involved, but don't stop believing that there is a better future out there for everyone and be a part of making it.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your remarkable journey and your thoughtful perspective on leadership, service, and the future of our communities. Your message reminds us that meaningful change begins with listening, understanding, and choosing to lead with purpose. So for those who would like to check out your book and connect with you, how can they do that?
The best way to do it is through my website, chrisrivers.com. that has all the links for the book. It'll have the updates for things that me and my team are working on. And if you want to stay connected to what we're doing, it's chrisrivers.com.
Okay, thank you so much once again. And thank you to all my listeners today for joining us on Hidden Secrets in Books. If today's conversation inspired you, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review on the show, and share this episode with someone who believes we can build a stronger future together. So until next time, I will see you guys again. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep discovering the hidden secrets behind every great story. Thank you so much, Christopher Rivers, for coming to my show.
Thank you for having me.